This video, created by the University of Missouri Agricultural Business and Policy Extension Program, provides information about crop share leases. A crop share lease is one where the landowner and the tenant split the crop produced in proportion to their share of contributed expenses. Determining the particular split of crop yield and of some expenses follows a simple process. But that process may be complicated by local custom. The landowner contributes the land. The tenant is fully responsible for some expenses, such as labor and equipment. Several, but not necessarily all, other input expenses are split between the property owner and tenant. Any input expense can be shared between property owner and tenant. Yield-increasing input costs should be shared between both the landowner and tenant. But as with any lease, nothing is set in stone. Everything is negotiable. Sharing yield-increasing inputs leads to better decisions on the quality and quantity of input to apply. If one person pays the total expense of a yield-increasing input, they may put less on than is optimal. If the expense is shared, they're more likely to put on the optimal amount. Fertilizer and pesticides are commonly considered yield-increasing inputs that are split by both parties of a share lease. Some landowners consider seed to be the responsibility of the tenant. Other landowners will share seed expense. Determining which inputs each party will fully provide and which inputs will be jointly paid is critical when negotiating share leases. Clarifying what each party contributes fosters a long-term, mutually satisfying leasing relationship. Cost of production budgets provide a great framework for discussing which inputs are contributed by one party and which inputs will be shared. Both landowner and tenant can mark which inputs they will exclusively contribute and which they expect the other to fully provide. All other inputs are then negotiated. Some expenses may be assigned to one party. Other remaining expenses may be split between the two parties. Fully understanding what each line of the cost of production budget means is also important. For example, the landowner might expect the tenant to do all field activities with his owned equipment. The tenant may not have a spray rig and needs to hire someone to spray weeds. Their lease agreement needs to specify whether the custom spray expense is paid fully by the tenant or is split with the landowner. From the cost of production budget, expenses can be transferred to a worksheet to help determine the share of output received by each. The landowner's contribution of land is added to the worksheet. The tenant's contribution of equipment, labor, and various inputs is then transferred to the worksheet. Value of tenant management can also be recognized as a contribution. In this example, the landowner provides only the land valued at $182 per acre. The tenant contributes $377 per acre of inputs. Total contributions are $559 per acre. By dividing everyone's contribution by the total contribution in this example, it is discovered the landowner contributes 33% and the tenant 67%. This 1/3 to 2/3 ratio is then used to determine what each party receives from the crop and what each party pays for the inputs to be shared between the two. All inputs not solely contributed by one party, such as fertilizer, insecticide, custom field work, and interest in this example, are proportionately split between the landowner and the tenant. 33% paid by the landowner, 67% paid by the tenant. Not every share agreement is 1/3, 2/3. This split is very common in southern Missouri. But central and northern Missouri have more 50-50 share agreements than 1/3, 2/3 share agreements. Other share agreements include 25-75, 30-70, and 40-60 splits. Local customs may affect the share. For example, corn may have a 1/3, 2/3 share, while soybeans grown on the same land may be split 40% landowner, 60% tenant. The share should be based on the relative contribution of each party. Crop share leasing offers definite benefits to both the tenant and the landowner. It requires communication and trust between each party. Writing down the agreement so each party remembers what was discussed and agreed upon helps prevent misunderstandings.